Hi everyone, today my guest Zoran Savin from IAB Slovenia. Hi Zoran.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. Please can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and IAB Slovenia, its goals and priorities, and how many companies is IAB Slovenia cooperating with at the moment?
Well, as you know, IAB is all over the world, and of course also in Slovenia. It's running in Slovenia for quite a while, I would say, maybe more than other countries around us. I think it's close to 20 years. It's been going on and off and so on, but more or less it's 20 years. Now we have more than 50 members, which is quite good for Slovenia, especially because we have a lot of membership within advertisers, which is a little bit, let's say, different than many IABs all around Europe. And we are trying to help them out in terms of the digital environment, in terms of knowing the market, knowing what is going on, and so on and so forth, because a lot of people need help in this department, which is, of course, things are changing day by day. So in digital, you're never safe. So we try to do our best to educate the market and move things forward.
And what's your role in IAB Slovenia?
My role is I'm the director, the CEO of IAB Slovenia. I have quite a lot of experience in digital. I was more or less in digital advertising, in classifieds, in e-commerce. All around the digital spectrum. And now I lead this organization. We are more or less three of us, so quite a small group, but it's a small market. So, anyways, it's good enough.
Okay, and how were Slovenian businesses affected by the COVID pandemic? Which sectors, apart from e-commerce, thrived during the last years?
Well, of course, on one hand, we had these sectors that were not good within a pandemic, especially tourism, probably. But we are seeing now that these categories are picking up quite a while now after the COVID. But overall, the overall status of the digital advertising was quite good also within the pandemic, which is also true for the whole Europe. But here in Slovenia, we grew 2%, 2 or 3% also in the pandemic years, which is great. I think that overall e-commerce is really thriving, not just in terms of selling within Slovenia, but also in the whole Europe. We are a small country, so for us, export, let's call it like that, it's quite important. So all these small and medium companies that operate all over Europe, all over the world, are thriving and were not let down. Well, some of them did in the pandemic years, perhaps most for the logistic part and so on and so forth, but they were, let's say, less struck than everybody else. And that's it. The only part, maybe it's the automobilist sector. They are going, up and down and up and down. But I think that's more connected with logistics and offerings than direct investment in the digital marketing or connected to that.
And how about customers? Did their expectation change as a result of the lockdown?
Well, of course. It took the companies quite a lot to understand that, right from March 20, so when the pandemic started, they did not understand that everybody shifted online, right? So they went through a phase like a quarter when they were kind of lost, but then they saw that everybody has switched online, and we had absolutely great numbers also on local media, and more or less wherever you went, the numbers went up for 30, 40% and more. We did not go up as much as, for example, UK in terms of e-commerce, because a lot of companies were not ready at the time. And that is maybe the biggest change in Slovenia, because within the pandemic, everybody went online in terms of e-commerce, but more or less preparing everything. So I think that we will have now, we will now see all the changes that went within the pandemic, because now in these 2 years, a lot of people went into the e-commerce sector, and now they have their stores up and running. So we will now see that change that was seen from today to tomorrow in UK, because a lot of companies were already in e-commerce. So I think that one part of the change that the pandemic has kind of boosted will be seen now in this year.
And which events and processes should companies in Slovenia be also on the lookout for the coming years?
Well, I think that, one major part for a small market like ours is the MarTech environment, right? AdTech and MarTech environment, because being a small market absolutely means that you have less people in the marketing department, which is, by itself meaning that you should invest in automatization of any kind, of any way that you can put your hands on, right? So I think that not a lot of companies have done that up until now. We had this research done by IAB Slovenia that is showing that, of course, a lot of people do email, a lot of people went into the marketing automatization the last year, but we're still not at the level where a small market like us should be at. We should really use all the MarTech, available variants out there to be able to compete with maybe, bigger markets, bigger teams in bigger companies. So I think that this is something that, and it also goes along with e-commerce, right? I mean, when you automate this part of the process, then you start automatizing everything, right? So.
Yes, of course. And on the other hand, after long months of lockdowns and restrictions, it's finally possible to meet live. Do you think that face-to-face contacts are still important in the business, or it can be conducted only remotely?
Of course they are. I mean, usually when we go out and try to tell companies what to do now in this, new environment, we would always say that, of course, you have to, be proficient in, Zoom or Microsoft or whatever Teams, whatever you are using. But that does not mean that there are some parts of the selling process that you should do live. And this is usually, the signing or the first meeting or something like that. But it is true that a lot of people now know how to use these tools, which is meaning that, in between these important meetings, you could have more, touching bases with them on different things. And then from there on, you can also optimize your selling process, because still, Slovenia is a small country, but still, if you go to, to Maribor or to Koper, or to different cities, it will take you the whole day. Whereas on Zoom, you can find, yourself doing all these things in 1 hour. So I think that there's a part of automatization process, and then there's a second part when you have to go and meet face to face. I mean, it is the best. It's the best thing that you can do, and especially when you're, either signing or this, let's say, bigger moments, but also when you try to, because nowadays it's maybe more important to, keep the connection. Mm-hmm. So you do, your lunch or your coffee with your business to business partners, and this is absolutely crucial.
Of course, totally agree with you. And how much is the Slovenian market impacted by the global events?
Well, being a small market, it's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Usually, when we're kind of struck, of course, by all the global events because the more that we globalize, the more everybody's struck. On some parts, we're not, because there are some parts of the economy which are run by, let's say, local companies. And this makes it easier maybe to respond to some of the, these global events on one part. Or the second part is a little bit harder to grow fast, because when the economy is growing fast in the global business, then you find yourself growing a little bit slower, or maybe adopting some of the things, for example, like digital marketing, a little bit slower. But then again, on the other part, you can establish, for example, we have the online audience measurement, which is one of the first in Europe that it was being established, back in the days. Why? Because we're a small market, so you gather 6 or 7 of the most important people in the market and say, let's start an audience measurement. So it's easier than, for example, in Germany or UK and so on and so forth. So there are pluses and minuses, and we're trying to seize both of them. So, yeah.
And how will the model of doing business in Slovenia change in the future, in your opinion?
Well, for the first part, I would say that it's changing now. Actually, these days, or maybe the last year, as you saw. Zenit now is saying that for this year, this region, the CEE region, would be one of the most impacted regions by the growth in the whole world. So I think that a lot of companies are understanding that, and now we're seeing a lot of companies from Europe, opening their branch offices or whatever in Slovenia, Croatia, and so on. From Volt, About You, whatever. So a lot of people entering the market, which was not the case maybe 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that will absolutely impact the competition, will impact the offering, will impact prices, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. And secondly, like I said, a lot of people went in the e-commerce part, and this will change the whole environment. One part because when companies go in the e-commerce, then they tend to invest more in digital advertising, right? And then secondly, it also impacts the logistic part of it. So either the post or the warehouses and so on and so forth. So I think that these are two things that will impact the most in the next, let's say, 2 years, and we're still trying to figure out, what will these bigger companies that they did not have quite a big, let's say, exposure here in Slovenia, like for example eBay or Amazon or things like that. What will be this impact if they decide to do more in a market like that? Because now we have a lot of local players that are absolutely number one in that categories. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how will this impact later on. We do not have any information for now what are their plans, so this might impact quite a bit the landscape.
Of course. So it's only seeing the results and analyzing it during the time when it's happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Zoran, very much for coming and talking to us a little bit about Slovenian market. Thank you for joining.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and bye-bye. Till the next time.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.